Good afternoon. My name is Legureña Valerio, and I'm the Associate Director for Program Development in the Latin American Liberian Institute. I also support with the LAII Mellon Endowment Field Research Grant. Thank you so much for joining us today for the information session. So, what is the LAII Mellon Endowment Field Research Grant? It's a small travel grant that allows students to conduct early stage of research in Latin America. And the way Latin America is defined for the purpose of this grant is any Spanish and Portuguese speaking country. So if you're interested in a country like Belize, it's English speaking, so it wouldn't be considered for this grant opportunity. Or Haiti, which is French speaking, or Puerto Rico, it is Spanish speaking, but it is considered a territory of the US and not as part of Latin America for this grant. So the goal of the grant is to help students to learn about Latin American languages, the site, and the cultures of the region, familiarize themselves with information sources relevant to your studies, conduct the master thesis, or conduct pilot project in case of dissertation research. And for a PhD student, you have to be at the early stages of your degree to qualify for this. So it's not really funds that you use to do your dissertation research, but it's pre-dissertation research. And the grant also allows you to create a network of contacts that could serve you for this research experience or future research experiences. So what is the eligibility? So it's open to any UNM master's student and doctoral student. And as I mentioned, the doctoral students should be at the preliminary stages of dissertation research. It's open to any student in terms of domestic or international, and international graduate students and professional students are highly recommended to apply. Any disciplines can apply for this opportunity, any student from any discipline. And if you were awarded the funds before, you still may apply, but you have to make sure that you're conducting preliminary research on a substantially different project. So it has to be a new project for us to fund it. Let me see. The qualified expenses, as I mentioned, is a small travel research. The average of the grants is between $2,000 and $4,000. And you can use those funds for the round-trip airfare, any in-country transportation, housing, or per diem meals. Some students also use the funds to buy equipment, especially students in the hard sciences. Given the amount of the money that students receive, most of the funds goes towards the airfare. Okay, so the research criteria. The research must be related to a human population in Latin America, including animal research. If you're doing a scientific work, you have to relate it to how that topic interacts with different societies in the region. Must be for master thesis or pilot dissertation research, as I mentioned before. If you're doing a group project and joint applications, it's not allowable, but if you're participating and you're carrying out your individual research within that group, that is allowable. Does that make sense? You might be participating in a group research, but when you apply for the research you are developing within that group. You cannot apply jointly with another person, in other words. As I mentioned before, it must be carried out in a Spanish or Portuguese speaking country of Latin America. And the research must be a minimum of 2 weeks or up to 4 months. And once you're awarded the funds, the research must be conducted within a year between April 15, 2025 and April 15, 2026. Most of our students go during the summer time because that's where you have a break to carry out research. Sometimes in Latin America, summer in some parts it's winter, and for some research, if you're in the sciences, for example, it's not a good time to go there during winter, but we have flexibility and you can go later on in the year. So what are the applications materials that you need to submit for this opportunity? You have to submit a completed application form to Qualtrics, which you can access on this link on our website. If you email me, I can send you the PowerPoint presentation so you can have access to those links, or you can go to our website under the LAII Mellon Endowment Field Research Grant, and you'll find the links there as well. You have to submit a research statement, which is 3 to 4 pages, double space. This is one of the most important part of your application because it's where you are explaining to the reviewers why you need the funding, how this opportunity will help you in your academic goals and help you succeed in the program. And you'll also be explaining the different elements of your research in that statement. You also need to include an itinerary with the different phases. Phase 1, consulting literature, phase 2, doing interviews, etc. You also need a letter of recommendation from your advisor, and that letter needs to be emailed directly to us at laibusiness@unm.edu. You also need to include your current CV or resume in your application, your unofficial graduate transcripts, evidence of applying for supplemental funding submission, any type of confirmation that you receive via email or a screenshot that you're submitting that application to those other entities at the university. The reason we do this is because the amount of our grant is not that large, so we want to make sure that you are supported by other sources at the university. And also it's a good practice for you to apply to as many places as possible. You also need to submit a budget and a budget justification. And we also want you to submit an airfare quote. Okay? Sorry, I forgot. The last point is it's optional, but it's highly encouraged that you include any letter of support from any institution or individuals you'll be interacting in the field, saying that they'll be providing help and they'll be supporting you. It's optional, but if you include it, reviewers look at that as a very strong proposal. Okay? This is an important part of the process. It's the one that takes the most time for students to get the IRB approval, if you need IRB approval. Everybody needs to contact the IRB office, even if you know you're not going to need the approval. We want some sort of verification that you're exempt to go through the IRB process. But if you go through the IRB process, we recommend you to start this as early as possible, because we've seen students that they're ready to go, but the approval is not in, and we cannot give you the funds until we receive that approval. So I will strongly recommend you to start the process now as you're applying for this opportunity. So that's the link. There's also a training for human research protections that you also need if you are deemed to go through RB approval. And in case that you're handling or working with animal, there's also another office that is for institutional animal care approval. It's the same thing. You should start as early as possible. We won't give you the funds without that approval. So once you are awarded the funds, you go to the field, everything goes great, hopefully. There are some post-award requirements. After you come back in August, if you go in the summer, you need to submit a brief report on research activities and summary of research expenses. Or more often, the students will submit the airfare receipt because, as I mentioned before, most of the funds goes toward the airfare. You also need to participate in the FRG colloquium, which is in fall 2025. You have to set that day aside and make yourself available to participate because it's part of the requirements of this grant. And any publication resulting from the research experience, you must acknowledge the LAI FRG support. And the application deadline is Wednesday, March 26th by 11:59 p.m. And you have to make sure that all the application materials are submitted by then, including the letter of recommendation from your advisor. And for any question regarding the application process and submission, or any questions you may have about the field, like how to contact other institutions for a letter of support, you may contact me. That's my email address and my office phone number. And now we're gonna break for questions. Don't stop it now in case
Yeah.
Okay. Questions?
What is the difference between budget and budget justification?
Yes. So the budget, and there's a template that we provide, and it'll be airfare, how much. If you are requesting per diem, you need to include from which day to which day and the rate for the per diem that you're using. And the budget justification is just a space where you write the logic for that budget. So I need per diem for 10 days because I'll be in this city from this time to this time. Equipment, so in the budget it'll be a line for equipment, you put the amount, but then justification, you explain, I need the equipment to carry out X, Y, and Z. So that's basically it's. You can write it as bullet points or as a paragraph, whatever is easier for you. Yes.
So I have a question. So do you have any requirement like what the research can be done on any human population in the Latin American region, but is there any restriction of a discipline?
No.
Okay.
This is open to any discipline on campus.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Thank you.
Selena?
Does it make the difference if, like, for example, in my case, right, if I want to go to my home country to do research, does it make the difference? Is it more damageable? Is it better?
Does it make difference in terms of?
Just like eligibility, like.
No, the only requirement is that you haven't worked substantially on that topic. So, and if you did your BA here, I guess it wouldn't apply to you, but sometimes we have students who join our let's say our PhD program, and they did master's degree in Brazil, and they were working on, I don't know, strikes, let's say, and then they come to the PhD program and they're still working on strike. You have to justify that that is very different to what you did with your MA in research. It could still be the topic, but the research has to change substantially. You cannot be given the funds to do the same research that you did. But that's the only conflict that we might see in terms of international students. Otherwise, I don't see any problem.
I'm a PhD student, but this is my second year, and last semester I will start the third year. So I'm wondering if I am able to participate in this or not.
So preliminary research is defined very differently in different disciplines. For example, in history, I'm from history, you do coursework, you might be teaching, you take your quals exam, then you do proposal, then you go to the field. So all the way till you submit your proposal, that's preliminary. Once I become a candidate and I'm doing the research for the PhD, I'm already at the dissertation stage, but I understand in different disciplines, this might happen at the same time. For the sake of simplicity, if it's the first time that you're going there to do your research, then that's preliminary. Even if after you come back, what you research there, you're gonna use it to write a chapter, that's okay. It's complicated because it's open to all the disciplines and not all the disciplines work the same way. Yes.
I have two questions. The first is the itinerary with the phases of research, is that part of the research statement, or is it like a separate form?
So when you go to the application, there'll be different uploads that you need to make,
Okay.
and the itinerary is one upload,
Yeah.
the research statement is another upload,
Okay.
and so on.
Okay. And then for the research criteria or requirements, can you do a combination? So if you're gathering either preliminary data, but also trying to visit institution to network for future research, or does it have to be one or the other, the justification? So let's say I want to go to Mexico to the Anthropology Museum to collect some preliminary data, but I also want to visit one of the INAs in the north to meet the curator there for future research. Like, would that count, or would I just focus on one of those two aspects to submit?
Well, you have to take into consideration how much time you have there,
Yeah.
and the preference will be to focus on the research that you're
Okay.
doing right away.
Uh-huh.
But if you have the time to do the other activities,
Yeah.
you can combine it.
Yeah.
I just, in your research statement, when you're presenting that, don't give the impression that you're not focused to the
Right.
reviewers,
Okay.
because that might be taken against you.
Right.
So if you know of a way of doing it without sounding that you're gonna spend most of the time on a research in the future that you don't even presenting to them,
Right.
then just be careful of not
Yeah.
going off a tangent, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Cool. Thank you.
Yes.
How many recipients are there per grant cycle?
Usually 6 or 7.
And on average, like more or less, how much is given to each recipient?
Yes, so it's an average between $2,000 and $4,000. Usually, it's students going to places where the airfare is higher, and then they receive a bit more. And like I said, most of the funds are used on the airfare, so we'll make sure that at least the airfare is covered. Selena?
I do have more questions. So the first one was for the IRB approval. We need to make sure to have the approval before we apply to the grant, or if we receive the funds before we leave for traveling.
You need it before leaving for traveling.
Okay.
So I recommend you to start right now when you're applying for the grant, but you don't have to have the approval by the deadline to submit the grant, the application. You need the IRB approval to be able to travel, for us to give you the funds to travel.
And if the place that we're traveling to has also like the equivalent to IRB.
You also have to navigate that.
Okay.
That's important, because some places, they require an IRB here and an IRB there. And I recommend you to work with your advisors to find more about what's needed locally, because that will change depending on your field. Nathan?
How do we receive the funds? If it is through the bursar account, because when I have received previous kind of scholarship as an international student, they discount. I don't know if it is called discount, or they
take
about
taxes.
30% of.
They take taxes, and the taxes that they take depends on the visa that you have and the number of days you are in the US. So it's very hard to tell. It's on a case-by-case basis. In the past, what we've done is that we will coordinate with the student and buy the airfare or some of the expenses we can purchase from here. We'll do that, and then the rest you receive through the student account. Yeah, that's one of the challenges, especially with international students. But for most people, this is once you give us the details about your trip, we will disperse the funds through the student account, and that takes like several weeks. Ideally, it takes up to 3 weeks. Sometimes financial aid is slower than that, and those are things we cannot control. But we will start on the payment as soon as we get that IRB approval. Yes.
Should there be a justification of why you want to conduct the study in a Spanish-speaking country?
Oh.
Like why you chose that country, for instance?
Well, yes. Why you're studying that country? Yes. Everything has to make sense, right? Like the research topic and why it makes sense to conduct it there and what you want to achieve. Yes. So in that sense, yes. But you don't have to justify that you're going to a Spanish country or a Portuguese country. Just the place needs to make sense within your overall research. Mm-hmm. Especially if you're doing comparative research, maybe you did already research, I don't know, on Canada, and your research is a comparative analysis with Mexico. And you said, I want to compare these two because X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Okay. Yes.
In terms of deliverables,
Yes.
could you tell us like more or less like what happens if we don't have any significant results, let's say?
Oh, no, I mean, this is preliminary research. coming back and the presentation that you give at the colloquium. And let's say the colloquium is in fall because most of the students go in summer. If you haven't gone to the field, then we'll make arrangement for you to present the next year. Neither.
For the budget, like for the airfare, we have to like to submit like a quote and from
Yes,
from
let's
the
say
website.
you do
But for the-
kayak
for
or
the other-
Google Flights,
Uh-huh.
you just take
for
a
the other
screenshot.
items, do we have to show something, or like for example for the food that I will need during that time, or the housing that we'll need, I need something, or that's something reasonable that you just we can just justify it?
For the per diem, the government have different limits to per diem. I will follow those because those are reasonable. Sometimes when you don't have an idea, you might the reviewers don't like it when you're presenting exorbitant numbers. So I think the best approach will be to check the Department of State rates for that city, and you say, I'm asking for this amount because I'm going to spend 10 days there, and per day the recommended per diem for meals and incidentals is this. So that way they know, oh, you did your research and you know that this is what's reasonable.
And what is that website? Department of State of the U.S. or our
The U.S.
home
Department of State, they have per diems allocations for every country.
Wow.
So if you look online, U.S. Department of State, let's say Colombia per diem, it'll take you to that page.
Okay.
Which I'll go back to the slides and I will add that, and then if you email me, I can share the slides with you, and so you have that information. Because I join these meetings when people are deliberating, and sometimes that's the part that hurts some student, because it's like, oh, why are you asking, let's say, $1,000 for food for a period of 5 days? It's like, but you know, if you never travel there, you don't have a good idea of what is reasonable. And I don't know if you noticed, but we changed the name. It used to be Field Research Grant, but we always use the Mellon Endowment to support this, and it sounds fancier to say the Mellon Endowment Field Research Grant. So I hope that helped you.
I thought they were two different kind of, but they are the same, right?
It's the same. We just changed the name, and we have another one, which is the Lashbrook, but that's only close to students in Latin American Studies, and that's for students who are in our program doing research, not in the narrowly defined Spanish-speaking and Portuguese-speaking countries. But if someone in our program wants to go to Puerto Rico to do research, then we have. But it's the same requirements apply, and it's the same deadline. But that one is not open to students in any field, but just our students.
From the deadline, how long it will take to know if we were approved or not?
Yeah, so typically the committee will meet 3 weeks afterward, because we take 1 week to compile the applications, and then we give them 2 weeks to read. Then they meet, and then we are letting people know within that week. So in total, I would say a month.